and all sessions. So we will be sending those links out tomorrow, and they may end up in Clutter. So if you don't see them, make sure to check Clutter. They do come from Eventbrite, so just make sure to check that. I want to give a quick introduction to Vicki. Vicki is the Director of Human Resources at Hazard Community and Technical College. She's been with HCTC for 34 years, working in the human resources area. She serves on the President's Cabinet at HCTC and is a member of the HR peer team and the PD peer team. Vicki is a Society for Human Resources certified professional, certified as a professional in human resources by the HR Certification Institute, and holds an MBA from Morehead State University. Vicki, thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us. Get your presentation up. There you go. And I will pass it on to you, Vicki. Thank you so much for presenting this afternoon.
Thank you very much, Paige. Can everyone hear me okay? I hope so. I want to welcome everyone to the session today. And we entitled this session, Squashing the It's Not My Job Myth. As we all know, there are lots of folks who work at our colleges, and during registration time and in the peak times of the season, our student affairs people really get covered over sometimes. And some of the departments, even though we're busy, we're not quite as busy as those departments are. So we came up with a pilot project here at Hazard. One of the things that we have that comes up every year with our financial aid department, and I'm sure that most of you all have those same pain points that we do, is that our students give us concerns about having access to our financial aid staff, particularly during the registration time and the first couple of weeks of class. It's real important for them to get in and see them, and they're trying to get their verifications done, and they want to know when their money's going to come, and they have questions about different issues that come up with their problems with their financial aid, and it sort of was just a real hot spot for us over the last couple of years. So what we decided we would do to try to solve that was to create a better customer service experience for our students that would get them faster access to the financial aid folks and try to get them faster answers to their questions. Hopefully, our thought was that if we could do this and do a good job at it, we could increase retention because our students would not be so frustrated with us. And that instead of us hearing, well, they never help me, they can't solve my problems, those kinds of comments, that we would maybe turn that around a little bit by giving them a better customer service experience. And even though we may not still be able to answer all the questions and do all the things that they want us to do, they may feel like they were a little bit more appreciated as a student because we took a little more effort to give them a better customer service experience. So, with that in mind, to give you a little bit of history about the college, we have 5 campuses that are located in 5 different county locations. We have our Hazard campus, which is in Hazard, of course. We have the technical campus, which is about 2 miles away. We have on that campus about 400 to 500 students on the tech campus. We have the Leslie County Center, which is about 18 miles away, and it's one of our smaller centers. And the Knott County campus is about 20 miles away, and it has a smaller number of students as well. And then we have the Lee's College campus, which is in Jackson, and that's about 30 miles away. They also have approximately 500 students on that campus. Unfortunately, due to budget reductions and those types of things, over the years, we've consolidated our financial aid staff. We only have 3. We have the director and 2 financial aid coordinators, and those individuals are all located on the Hazard campus. So the students who are on these other campuses most often feel like they're not given the same attention as the ones on the Hazard campus, and if they want that type of attention, they would have to drive those miles, which we all know that can be a hardship for some of our students to drive that far to get to a campus location where they can walk in and actually talk to somebody. So with that in mind, we started looking at different ways that we could solve the problem in some ways and make a better student experience. So the first thing we did is we met with the financial aid staff. This whole conversation actually started because during over a lunch conversation with some of the financial aid folks, we were just having lunch one day, and they were talking about how they wish they could do more to help the students, but there's only 3 of them, and there's just not enough bodies to go around. So we met with them to start talking about what kind of basic information the students asked for when they came in. Were there certain things that they wanted to know? And obviously, if it's a personal issue with the student, like they don't have all of their information in, or there's some kind of issue with the FAFSA or something like that, that's going to take a little bit more time than a question of when does financial aid get dispersed? Or who do I turn this form into, this verification form? Where does that go? Those kinds of questions. So we met with them and we tried to figure out what kind of basic information students were asking for. We also tried to have them give us a guess, an estimated guess, of the average amount of time that a student, it would take to solve a student issue. Um, for example, if the student came in with a verification issue, is that like a 2-minute conversation, or is that a longer term, detailed type conversation? And we asked them to work on pulling those kinds of information together for us. Then we talked with the employees, primarily in student services, that I'm sorry about the message I'm getting over on the side about the voice fading in and out. I'm thinking that's my microphone. I'll try to hold it closer to my mouth. Um, then we spoke with employees on the extended campuses to try to determine what kind of questions students on those campuses had. For example, were they calling and then nobody calling them back? Were they sending emails and not getting timely responses? Those kinds of things. And then the last thing that we did is once we came up with our pilot idea, we sort of had a conversation with our college leadership, which is the president's cabinet, and we asked them for buy-in on the process, because if we want to put something in place, we would be using their employees, and we wanted to make sure that we had their approval before we started asking folks to volunteer to go work in another department for a couple hours during registration and that kind of thing. So once we had all of that in place, the next thing that we did is we developed the process. The process is really simple in the sense that we sat down with the financial aid people and we said to them, okay, if a student comes into you, what are the basic pieces of information that you need from them? And we created this little form, and there's a picture of it there on the screen. And it basically asks for the student's name, their ID number, the assigned number, and I'll talk about that in just a minute, and the general concern or issue or question that the student might have. So it was really just a simple tool to collect the information that the student would have when they came into the visit with them. And the purpose behind this form was that when the student got in to see the financial aid coordinator or the staff, that those individuals would already sort of have a heads up about what the student needed, what their problem was, what their issue was, what their question was, and they also could have time to look that student up and have their file pulled up in front of them before the student actually got into their office. Again, which would help with the efficiency of talking with the student and helping solve their problems. The next thing that we did is we created a numbering system where students were assigned sequential numbers as they contacted financial aid. So we just basically took an Excel spreadsheet and made 3 columns. And on column 1, we would write down the student's name. And then column 2 and 3 would just be like the number 1 twice, the number 2 twice, the number 3, and so on and so on. Then when a student came in, The student came in, we would write their name down beside the number 1, and that way then we would tear off the little number 1 and give it to them, and that way they would know that they were number 1 in the order to be seen that day, and so on and so on and so on. And then we went and identified different locations at the extended campuses. For example, at the Lee's campus, there is a student services office that's considered like a floater office. And we identified that office to be the office where students would go when they would get their call back from financial aid so that they could have a private consultation. You never know what the student is going to be talking about. They're talking about their tax returns, about dependents, and they're given social security numbers, and those kinds of things. And so we felt that it needed to be a private setting for them to be able to do that. We also next recruited employees outside of student services to help with this project. Again, we used, in our project, we used HR staff. We used some the administrative assistant from the president's office. We had an academic dean and a couple of administrative assistants in academics. We have the EPIC grant here in Hazard, and we got to use 3 of the staff from that program. We even had our dean of operations and our maintenance and operations supervisors help us with this project. We kind of looked for people who had customer-friendly personalities, because you really didn't need to know very much about financial aid to be helpful with the project. You just really wanted to be able to make the student feel welcomed and kind of appease them, and because sometimes they would have to wait as much as 2-3 hours to get to see somebody. So you really wanted to try to set the tone that you are welcome here. We're going to do everything that we can, and we're going to move you through here as quickly as we can. And then the last part of the project was the financial aid staff prepared for us the frequently asked questions. So that if a student walked in and just said their question was, when is financial aid going to be dispersed? With a little bit of information, we could provide them with that date, and they didn't have to wait an hour or 30 minutes to get in to talk to somebody to get an answer to that question. So to kind of walk you through an example of how it worked, say a student walked in the financial aid office on the Hazard campus. The greeter would meet the person, have that student complete the information sheet, and assign them the number. I just use number 1 in this example. It's just sequence, whatever it might be. The student's name would be recorded on the master sheet, and they'd be given their little card with number 1. If they had a detailed question that couldn't be answered using the FAQ, then what we would do was say to the student, you are number 1, you are number 10, you are number 30, whatever number they were, and that we have X number of students in front of you. For example, when we got down into the middle of the day, we would have sometimes 5 or 6 students waiting. And so we would say to those students, you are number 5. It takes about 15 minutes per student. You have this much time. You need to be back here in the office by such and such time. This way they didn't have to sit, stand, stare around the office. We also offered them a waiting area where they could go into another room that we had, where we had things like coffee and water set up. Lots of times they would bring their children, so we had some coloring books and crayons available. Most of our waiting rooms were like student lounge areas, so there was a TV. Things like that that would kind of help them pass the time versus standing there just waiting when they're going to be next or when is their turn. And then as their number would come up, the financial aid person will pull up their information in PeopleSoft, kind of do a real preliminary research about what the issue was based on what the student told them on the piece of paper, and then they would let us know, and we would go get the student and bring them into them. And that way the student was standing out the door waiting and talking, and the longer they stand, the more aggravated they get and that kind of thing. So the idea was to keep them have a better customer experience by treating them with more customer-friendly behavior. In the same scenario, say a student from the Lee's campus calls, which is 30 miles away, we would put that student as number 2 because that would be like the next person in line. That student, we would get their information over the phone, and we would have them escorted to a waiting area, and then as the financial aid staff become available, When they got to number 2, then they would call that person as opposed to taking the next person who was standing in front of them on the hazard campus. It's sort of like a hold your place in line kind of thing. And we found that that kind of really did help with our students, especially on our extended campuses. And then another scenario would be that the student walks in and they have a easy to answer question, and that we would still have them complete the information sheet. We still assigned them a number, and then based on their question, we were able to answer those questions, and that student could just get their information and leave. Therefore, that reduced the wait time for some of the other students who were in line, and it also made it much easier for that particular student because they didn't have to wait 30 minutes to get an answer for a question that was a simple answer kind of question. Our volunteers would continue to assign sequential numbers to students as they contacted financial aid, whether they called, if they came in person or they came on the phone. Whatever order they hit the office, that's what number they got in sequence. And then the financial aid people worked through those numbers, and we until they could get back to respond to the students as quickly as possible throughout the day. So the results we had, we piloted this in the spring semester. Our students provided us with very positive feedback on their experience, especially those who were on the phone from the other campuses, because they felt that we were providing them with a service that was much more user-friendly to them. And they felt like they were being served better because we don't have a physical body on those campuses. And this way, that gave them the advantage of being almost the same as if they were walking into the office itself. The other advantage to that is that we collected a lot of data during this. We got the number of students that financial aid was serving daily, which before we kind of had a ballpark figure, like we know they're doing 30 or 40 or 50, but we really didn't have any specific data, and this gave us that. The other thing that we got out of it is that we got sort of a running total of the types of issues that students were having with their financial aid. And it's our plans to review that and try to provide some more training to students so that maybe those issues would be avoided in the future. Because if you have 10 people who have the same problem, we felt that we might be able to develop something through our orientation program that as we talk to students, we can say, look, this is a particular problem that comes up quite often. If you have this, this is what you do to avoid that. And so we're hoping that that would be a way for us to try to better educate our students and avoid some of those issues in the future. So that's pretty much what we've learned. If anybody have any questions that you would like to ask at this point. I see in the chat that Pamela asked us, have we been able to share this with other financial aid directors? No, we have not. We still were only doing a pilot at this point. The spring semester, as you know, is usually not as busy as the fall semester, and we really want to fine-tune it a little bit in the fall and see if it works as well as it did in the spring. And then if it works well, then we're going to give it to Chuck Anderson, who is our financial aid director, and he can share with whomever he likes. Any other questions?
Great presentation and ideas, Vicki. I love what you guys are doing there. I think several of the participants did as well. Some great ideas. So thank you so much for sharing. If you guys have questions or comments for Vicki, go ahead and post those in the chat and we'll get those answered. Just as a reminder, this session was being recorded. It will be going out to everyone in an email from Eventbrite. It can show up in your clutter, so if you don't see it tomorrow, check clutter and it should be there. Our next session coming up at 2 o'clock is Wendy Schindler from Gateway, Disney Magic, Transforming the Student Experience with World-Class Customer Service. So please join us for this session at 2. You're welcome to stay right here, or if you need to jump off and then come back at 2, that is fine as well. So Vicki, thank you again for your time and sharing your expertise. That's a great idea. I love that. I can't wait to hear what the fall results are And if they're just as successful, which I'm going to imagine that they will be, that we can get that out to some other financial aid directors to share your experience and what's happening and get those students with that positive feeling about registration and their financial aid and getting all of that taken care of. So thank you very much. I certainly appreciate that.
Thank you. You're welcome.
All right, everyone. Well, we will take a break and we will be back at 2 o'clock.